This is the Desi Doubts podcast. Navigating mental health, societal expectations, and identity is not easy. I'm Dr. Sonalee Joshi, PhD in clinical psychology, therapist, and visual artist.
I'm Rupal Joshi, co-founder of South Asian Americans for Change, single mom, and lawyer. We share our personal stories and the most up-to-date research to give you the tools to figure it out one step at a time.
You don't have to do this alone. You've got this, and we've got you.
We are so excited for you to hear this episode. It is all about platonic friendships, why they're important for your well-being, and how they've changed our lives, particularly during times of struggle.
And we have two incredible guests joining us for this episode as well. So you'll get to hear from some experts in multiple fields, but also experts in friendship. Do you want to introduce your guest for the episode, Rupal?
Yeah, so I asked Dr. Keerthi Channarasappa to join, who is one of my very best friends. We co-founded South Asian Americans for Change together, and she's also a pediatrician at CHOP, which is a really prestigious and well-known children's hospital here in Philadelphia.
And I have invited my best friend from graduate school, Dr. Afsara Zaheed. She is trained as a neuropsychologist and has a lot of expertise in how social connection impacts aging and cognitive aging. And so having her on this episode was a joy for me just because I like hanging out with her, and she's out in Pittsburgh, so I don't get to see her too often. But also, I think a real treat for us to be able to really dive into the neuroscience behind friendship and the importance of social connection as well. We also cite a lot of really interesting research, and all of that will be in our show notes. That'll be in the resource packs that we have associated with the episode. So if you're finding yourself taking notes and trying to digest it all, just know that those resources are there for you after the episode as well.
Yeah, so without further ado, let's get into it.
We are joined here by a few people who aren't usually here. But we're very excited to have them. So can we have our guests introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Keerthi Channarasappa. I'm one of the co-founders of SAAFC for Change, and I'm also the president, and I'm a pediatrician.
Hi, I'm Afsara Zaheed. I am Sonalee Joshi's friend, and also a clinical neuropsychologist.
And we're so excited to have you both. So, Rupal, do you want to talk a little bit about why we decided to have our friends on this episode, other than the fact that we like hanging out with our friends?
Yeah, mostly because we like to yap with our friends. But no, this is actually one of the episodes that I'm most excited to film. We are talking today about the importance of platonic friendships. And I just feel like, for me, especially like female friendships are just pure magic. Like there's nothing else like it in the entire world. And so we wanted to talk about it.
I think there's also something really specific within the queer community too, which is that your friends often become your chosen family. And that's certainly been the case for me. So that's been very important from a personal perspective. We also just happen to have friends who are really cool and talented and have a lot of expertise in this particular area too. We have a pediatrician with us and we have a neuropsychologist. And so we're really able to talk about how social connection matters across the lifespan too, which is something that I don't think we talk about enough, because we're often really focused on it within the context of like, especially Gen Z, millennials, like kind of the 20s, 30s period is when we're reckoning with what social connection really means. But we're at a day and age where I think young children are having a lot of difficulty making those social connections because of a number of reasons that we're going to get into. And then we also don't really talk about what that looks like on the older end of the spectrum too, with older adults and how that affects cognitive aging and development. And I definitely want to get Dr. Zaheed's expertise in there as well. But before we get into all of that, that's kind of a little preview of where we're going. Let's start with the basics. How did we meet our friends? Keerthi and Rupal, can I have you talk a little bit about how you all met and how you became friends?
This is my favorite story ever of how we met Rupal. As Rupal was mentioning too, that like friendships have always been important. Like I've always really prioritized friendships as well. But I was really excited to go to Penn State. I had been stalking their dance team. I loved dancing. I was so excited to try out. And I remember going the very first day of tryouts, like waiting excitedly outside of the room to like get in. And lo and behold, guess who's opening the door but Rupal Joshi, the current captain. She turns to me and she's like, "Hey, I really like your purple eyeliner." And then there begins this like level of I don't know if we can say this, but I really felt like it was love at first sight, but friendship wise. So yeah, our story began in college. Like we went through so much our first few years dancing together, building a team together. Like it was just incredible. We were roommates. And then even after college, we lived together while we were in grad school. And then even after we both did our separate professional trainings, graduated, working our big girl jobs, coming back together to live in the same neighborhood, that has just been incredible. And then starting Soft for Change together. So we really we went through it all.
I know. Hearing you say that in just like a minute and a half, I'm like, there's so much there. But yeah, we did the dance team together. We grew up together. We've been friends for, well over 16 years, 15 years now. Yeah.
I think in examining like why have Rupal and I been friends for so long? Like what exactly is it that keeps us coming back to each other? We both were driven, or I guess linked by similar interests. First the dance team, then by even though we like pursued two completely different fields, law and medicine. I think we both felt aligned in like sort of more intensive careers, and then coming back together and starting Soft for Change, like we've just had this affinity for similar causes and similar things being, I don't know, brought together by that. But I would say so much more than that. I've told Rupal this so many times, like you are like one of my soulmates, one of the greatest loves of my life, and you feel like home to me. So yeah.
You feel like home to me. I think this is something that I've noticed with some folks that are like, a little bit younger, a little bit of like a generational difference is like, you need to put effort into your friendships. Like it is a give and take. And some people feel like, like I can't make close relationships. But the way that our friendship is, like, there's no tit for tat, first of all. But you are one of these people that puts so much effort into all of your relationships, Katie. Like you are, I know, like giving gifts is one of your love languages. So like whenever you're thinking of, like, if one of us is sick, there's like always a care package on the way. She's dropping off chocolates and Theraflu and cough drops and everything. And also checking in with like words of affirmation too. Like sometimes I feel like when I'm upset even before I know. And so it's that effort, and then because you're such a good friend, it makes me also want to be a good friend to you. Like not as like, again, like not because of a tit for a tat, but it's just because I appreciate you and like the love that you show so much. It makes me want to do it too. I think that's probably like the biggest one that maybe people are missing now.
And just to interject briefly on that, I think something I've seen as someone who's sort of joined Soft for Change after you all kicked it off, like hearing you both talk about that and how your friendships have been formed, and then reflecting on the early events that I went to where I was like, I don't know how this is going to be. I don't know if people are going to embrace me. I don't know if I'm going to feel welcome here. But then both of you have made efforts to connect with me and then connect with all of the people who come to our events. And the reason I highlight that is I think the sort of microcosm of your friendship and the way that you are as friends translates to those community spaces. And so I just wanted to highlight there the fact that learning to be friends and learning to how you interact with your friends can also have this ripple effect on your community in a really effective and helpful way too. So
I want to hear a little bit about you and Afsara, because I actually don't know. I know that you guys have known each other for many years, but I don't know how you became friends. sort of what this topic means to you, how female friendship has like played a role in your life. So, yeah, can you explain it to us?
Yeah, I
I
can
was
start us
thinking
off.
about, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I still remember. So, I met Sonalee, or I guess we met each other for the first time during grad school interviews. And so it was like not a dance team tryout at all, but it was like grad school tryouts in Ann Arbor. And it was like, first of all, I will never forget what she was wearing. It was like the coolest teal blazer. And I still love that piece from your closet. Like, if we were the same size, I would have stolen it a long time ago. But she was just so cool and so kind that, like, if I don't remember, and I don't remember anyone else from that interview, but I remember Sonalee. And she was already in Ann Arbor, and so she knew the area, and she like decided to lead for all of us newbies that were coming around in February for 2 days, like an impromptu campus tour, because like the program didn't offer that. So that goes to show that, like, you know, she'll just like take initiative and do really nice things for people. But I think that's how we really bonded, because she's walking around like teaching us little tidbits about Michigan and showing us her favorite like quirky bookshop that I then went to for like 6 years. And it was like the most perfect day in February. Like, it was in February and it was sunny and it was 70. And I think that was a sign that we were meant to be together for a very long time.
Which is not how it normally is in February in
No,
Michigan. So
very much
it was,
not.
Yeah.
Surprised that you said that.
Yeah, I was catfished for sure. But yeah, I think, you know, like we kind of clicked immediately. Like, I very much remember us hanging out that weekend and then texting for like a couple of weeks after, trying to be like, did you get in? Because if I get in, I want you to get in. Like, I want, you know, like, and I remember one of the questions you first asked me was like, oh, like, do you like movies? Like, what's your favorite movie? And I like didn't even, I was like, I don't care what your question means. Like, I'm just going to assume that you mean Bollywood, and I'm going to talk to you about Bollywood. And it like worked out well for us. Although now I know that you like a lot more than just Bollywood.
But I mean, that's a good answer. I'm glad that we got to start on that route.
I'm glad you didn't write me off for being like basic. That's what I.
No, for sure. I mean, I think I could say, I mean, this is also weird for me because we don't do the Love Fest often. We are very supportive, and like we are like constantly talking to each other about like work and cheering each other on, and we're very supportive, but we're not often like lovey-dovey. So this is a lot for me, from you specifically, but I'll take it. I receive it. And I feel the same way about you. I mean, I think I was so excited when I met you, and I so wanted you to be in the program with me, just because you're a very cool person, but also I think very early on, we realized that like, even though we have very different focuses in terms of the work that we do and the way that we got to this career, we both have very similar family values, very similar cultural values. And that's a thing that, again, they don't really teach us in grad school. Like, we didn't have a lot of mentorship around how to be brown psychologists.
Are there any?
Now there are. Now that there are the two of us, and some other great folks that we've met. But I think really having you, especially in those early years, to talk to about like, hey, how do I navigate this career and still make time for my parents or for my family? How do I talk to my relatives abroad about what it means to be a psychologist? You know, just how do you navigate some of the cultural quirks of this field in a way that not everyone can appreciate? Like, having you in that and having your very practical mindset around that was also just so invaluable. So I know we've been speaking about friendship broadly, but also like friendship within the community and with people who understand your identities and can get where you're coming from, I think is so validating in so many ways. I also want to kind of take a side tangent very quickly because I just spoke about how we both same graduate school program, but when you introduced yourself, or when we introduced you, you're a neuropsychologist, and we've been talking a little bit about terminology and the different providers that people can access for their mental health. And I think a neuropsychologist is one of those things that we don't hear about or talk about until it's the time that we need one. So very hard left, but can you define what a neuropsychologist does and how you and I are a little bit different in what we do generally?
Sure. Yeah. So neuropsychology is a subspecialty within clinical psychology. So as we kind of talked about, we both went through training as a clinical psychologist primarily. But neuropsychology is like a specialty service where broadly we try to understand brain behavior relationships. And so a neuropsychologist can work with anyone across the lifespan. I personally work with older adults. And in that end of things, I try to understand if someone later in life is experiencing issues with their thinking, memory, sudden sort of behavioral changes, sudden onset of depression when they maybe didn't have that throughout their life. What that might mean in terms of like a brain-based pathology. A lot of times that means something like Alzheimer's disease or other dementias. It might be due to other medical conditions. But that's one end of the neuropsychology spectrum. There are also pediatric neuropsychologists who, might be working more with developmental disorders, things like ADHD, other conditions. And so usually it's just trying to understand, if we're presenting in a certain way in terms of our thinking, our behaviors, how does that tie back to the brain? And then since we're coming from a clinical psychology perspective, are there interventions or therapies or sometimes medications that can help manage those conditions? So,
one thing that I think we haven't addressed yet, which is kind of the $1 million question, is why are platonic friendships important? And I touched on this in the beginning of the episode, especially in the Desi community. Like, we grow up with, get a good education, do all the things, and then immediately, as soon as you hit like 22, it's all about getting married. There's not really that much celebration for friendships. And so from sort of like a mental health, a science, a wellness, a lived experience perspective, I want to talk about why we need to give more weight to these really important relationships in our lives. I think for me, at least, in terms of priority, like, it is one of my top priorities. Like, I have my kid, I have my work, and then like family and friends is like right up there. To the extent I foray back into a romantic venture at some point in life, like, that is going to be below. And I think even when I was married, my friendships were still kind of like pretty up there, which, might have caused some fights every now and then, but I mean, they're important. So let's sort of talk about that from a variety of like the perspectives and all of your professional expertise as well.
Yeah, I just want to say something that you said really stood out to me just now. So you put friends and family in like one bracket. And I think for us, like, we think of our friends and our closest friends like as family, right? Because we're so socialized into thinking as family being like, the highest level of support and love that you can have for somebody. And it's something that we're also taught. So I remember like growing up, my mom was always like, why do you want to hang out with your friends so much? Like, we're doing family time, or, you don't get this excited to want to hang out with family, or take your sister then with you, right? Who is 6 years younger than me, by the way. So when I'm like 12, I don't really want to take my 6-year-old sister like with me everywhere. We're friends now, though, which again, that was a title she wanted for a very long time. So she'll be very excited to hear this. But I think that there is a distinction in how maybe our parents sort of see friends and family and how we sort of see it, right? I'm very visual, so you can see with my hands. And I think that that's something that's really important to kind of realize when we have these conflicts with family members or even partners who maybe might not feel that same way when we do. And I think it's a really important distinction to have. I'm happy to talk about like research that shows the difference between friends and family, because I think that's super, super cool. But yeah, it's just, you said that, and I really wanted to point that out because I think that, it really highlights how much we value our friends. It really is kind of on that really high tier for us, at least. Yeah.
Wait, talk about that research. That sounds cool.
Yeah. Let me tell you about some research on friends and family. So there were a series of studies that I worked on with a former postdoc in my lab in grad school. She's really cool, Nika Sharifian. And it was to look at our social networks and the composition and size and structure of our social networks, and how that might be related to our memory and thinking as we age, so in later life. A lot of the sort of messaging is like, oh, Facebook and social media is like rotting our brains and things like that. But the benefits of that, right, is that we're now able to stay in touch with people who are not necessarily living in close proximity to us, right, as we talked about before. But there were these series of studies that showed that among older adults, it's not just how many people you have in your social network that's helpful in terms of maintaining cognitive functioning or socio-emotional functioning, but that percentage split between friends and family matters. And I'm curious what you think. So, do you think that having a higher percentage of friends or a higher percentage of family in your social network is better for your overall sort of mental cognitive well-being? Like, what would be your gut reaction for people that are like above the age of 60?
My gut is friends.
Same. Yeah. I think a lot of times, sorry,
Go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, I think a lot of times with family, there's a lot of baggage or like a lot of obligation and sense of like responsibility that is not necessarily there with friends because it's a choice.
That's literally it. So, this is no way at all a dig, or, a suggestion that like you should just drop your family and hang out with your friends. But, it really does highlight just the value of maintaining friendships well throughout your life. And like Kitty, you hit it like on the nose, right? Like one of it is the different responsibilities that we have for our friends, like towards our friends versus our family, and maybe the strain that might come with family relationships where it might not be a healthy relationship necessarily or a positive one, but you feel obligated and responsible. Maybe there's a financial responsibility component to it and, ways that it contributes to stress. Whereas with friends, it's a lot more reciprocal, right? And the other side of it is not just like the support versus strain, but it's also the effort that we talked about, right? The effort that it takes to maintain a friendship. You have to plan to meet up with your friends. A lot of times they don't live in your house. You have to plan birthday parties and you have to plan trips. And it's not always a given that they'll just be there when you come home. So you have to work around your schedules and you might be engaging in mutual hobbies that are good for you, that get you off the couch. So there's a lot of reasons why keeping your friends and being in touch with them is just like so good for you at any stage, but especially later in life when a lot of other health issues pop up, like friends keep you going. And it's not just in terms of how you function, but some of these studies also showed that like your literal brain looks different. Like the size of your brain is different if you have more friends in your network. So wanted to quickly plug that in case anyone wanted a scientific reason for why they should hang out with their friends more.
What is happening when you see somebody, particularly an older individual, that has that robust network?
Yeah. So the study that I'm specifically referring to, we can't really make like causal claims. So it was cross-sectional. So we're looking at people's brain volumes, specifically in their cortex. So like the higher level of functioning, like how we're thinking and making decisions and all of that. And, correlating that with the network of the size of their social network as well as the composition. So is your social network that people that you see regularly, if we define that as like a month and X amount of interactions, is there 10 people there? Okay, cool. Of those 10 people, how many would you classify as friends? How many would you classify as family? How many would you classify as like a significant other? And looking at then the relationship between that composition and that brain volume, and then also looking to see if that brain volume sort of explains how you're functioning in terms of your memory and language and overall cognitive abilities. And so the people who had larger sort of cortical brain volumes, they had more friends than family in their network. And so it might be the other way around. It might be that having a bigger brain allows you to be a better friend. So we can't really tease it apart in that direction, but it really does build a case for it being, friendships being a good thing, certainly. And that it's different from family in a certain way that like we should pay attention to.
Does this translate into kids too, Kitty? I mean, I'm certainly not. I know that like the specifics will be different, but I'm assuming that there are health benefits for kids having social connections as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's social connection and like understanding relationships. Like comes all the way from whenever you're an infant, like learning to mimic expressions that your parents are making at you. And then when you're a toddler, learning to do parallel play. By the time you're in preschool, you're starting to make like group friendships. You may have a best friend. And then when you're like in the pre-tween stage, like 8 to like 11 years old, you're shifting your focus actually from sort of your parents being your whole world and kind of focusing or basing everything you do off of that to being very heavily influenced by your peers. And I think this lasts until like maybe you're 14, 15, where it's this huge area of life where you're really learning to do things like empathize, do things like negotiate, do things like creating connections, relationships. It's all a practice field, and like the choices that you make, establishing your independence, preferences, it's all really heavily influenced by your peer group. And I think generally, like the American Academy of Pediatrics has said that peer relationships, even throughout like your teenage years and your young adult years, has been a protective factor for mental health issues, basically because it increases your resilience. You have like a safe space to go to. And also people who have friends are practicing these skills that are good at conflict resolution, learning how to be with others, as opposed to, if you are a kiddo who is having trouble with those things, you may not be as resilient, you may be more isolated, and this could lead to more negative outcomes.
It's like you need help carrying the load, I think is what you're saying. And so if you have help carrying the load, that's a protective factor against some of these negative outcomes, including, mental health struggles.
Rupal, you said something else I thought was really interesting. The friendship and the romantic relationship and like the tears. And I just wanted to say, I think things serve different purposes in your life. I don't expect my husband to fulfill all of my emotional needs. And that's why I also have friends, right? If I were to expect him to do all the things that you and I do together, or like that we get out of each other, I think it would just set us up for not a great relationship. And I think there's also multiple roles that different friends can fulfill. Like, a friend who's far away that you don't talk to as much, but like when you get together, it feels like nothing's ever changed, or the friend that you see that lives close to you. I think all of these friends, a friend that you work out with, a friend that you have a creative hobby with, a friend that you work with, all these are fulfilling like different roles in your life.
Esther Perel actually talks about this, and she's, pretty well-known psychologist, I think. She just got hired by like Hinge to like rewrite all of their prompts, and she teaches a master class on relationships. And she says, like, one of the reasons why it appears that people are struggling to find a romantic partner these days is because we're expecting a romantic partner to fulfill all of these different areas of our life. We want them to be our therapist. We want them to be our career coach. We want them to be our emotional, like, support person. And it's just too much to put on one person. And I totally agree with like the friendship point. Like, we sort of tick off so many, like our friend group ticks off so many of my emotional needs at this point in my life that I feel like I don't even need a romantic partner. Because we have intellectual conversations. I feel like I have the emotional support. I feel so much more energized, like even if I'm tired or exhausted from like working a 12-hour day and then taking care of a kid and putting him to bed, but just like talking with you guys, if you guys come over like after Idris is asleep and just like sitting and watching Sex in the City or ordering takeout or like going for like one of our hot girl walks like around the neighborhood, like in between work and bedtime, like I feel immediately re-energized. And one of the other things I just wanted to say is when I was at like the hardest period of my life, I didn't even like recognize myself. I was just in sort of like survival mode. I feel like I didn't remember or like know who I was anymore. And there was so much sort of like, not self-hate, but like sadness, because I was like, who have I like become? Like, I'm not this person. by hanging out with you guys and talking with you guys, like, I think Nima was the one who said this. She was like, it was during the pandemic. So she was like, we were getting on a Zoom once a week, like non-negotiable. And you guys like reminded me who I was. Like, I think it's just so powerful, particularly in like tough periods. So this protective mechanism thing that you said makes sense. And also, Afsara, like what you were saying about how, you know, you just like have a more like robust life when you have those social connections, regardless of quantity. It's really like the quality, I think, makes so much sense. And Sonalee, you probably see this in your work too, like particularly dealing with people who are suffering from like really serious substance abuse issues. Like, I know that like you need a great support system and able to get through something like that.
For sure. I think no matter what kind of mental health intervention we're working on, I think substance use certainly lends itself to that, with mutual support groups being one of the leading treatment mechanisms that helps people succeed. But also, you know, in my work with folks with PTSD or anxiety, I will often have folks recruit their loved ones, their friends, into the different kinds of homework that they might be doing after session, or thinking about, you know, people say that like, I want to do this so that I can spend more time with my friends, so I can build these social connections. And I just want to pause here, because I think all of the things that we're hitting on are really underscoring how important it is to be maintaining and growing those social connections. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about, you know, I imagine there are some people listening to this that might say like, you know, I'm working really hard to build friendships. It's actually really tough for me to find new people. I remember when I moved to Philadelphia, when I moved to Oklahoma, I was like, I don't know how to make friends without the school structure around me. And so as the resident context person in the room, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the contexts that have actually made it more difficult for us to build those social connections. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I think that you're hitting on, Keerthi, is this idea of diversification of the roles in our lives. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a relatively new social concept. But it really comes out of this function of what's called an amatonormativity. So this idea that the world is set up around us for couples in monogamous, often heterosexual relationships. And the asexual community and the queer community have done a lot of research in this area. And that's a great place to start if you're interested in some of those concepts. But there's this idea that the world is designed for you to find a partner, get married, have 2.5 kids, right? And so now that we're seeing that structure isn't holding and that isn't serving every need that we have, people are starting to say like, hey, maybe I need to put my eggs in multiple baskets. Maybe I need to start relying on my friends, my community, my family, other support systems than just my, you know, partner in that equation. So that's one system that I think sets us up for failure in a kind of way, is having these amatonormative systems that say like, yeah, you have to rely on a spouse to be able to get medical care. You have to be able to rely on a spouse to, you know, put someone down as your emergency contact. Like all of these things are just designed around that framework. Similarly, I think, you know, across the lifespan, it's hard to make friends these days. I think a lot more people are saying like, I just don't know where to find people. I want to say hi to people. I want to hang out with people, but I don't quite know how. And I think there's been a real downshift in the amount of what are called third spaces that exist in the world, especially since COVID. There are a lot fewer spaces where you can just go without paying and just meet random people that aren't, you know, school or work or whatever it might be. And these used to be spaces, kind of watering holes, where people could come together and just, you know, form those informal social connections. So there are functionally fewer spaces where we can actually be doing that. Even in the public spaces that we have, I think many of us, I know when I'm on SEPTA, I'm often looking at my phone. I'm not really thinking about talking to the people around me. And so again, there's just a lot of reasons why people might have more trouble these days making those inherent social connections than in previous years. And we could even extend that to older adults and especially immigrant populations too. I think culturally in the East, like my grandmother had the most poppin' social life for the longest time, well into her 80s and 90s. She had all these people in her community who she would go see every single day. And I think that the world was sort of like built like that around her. But then when you immigrate to the United States, you're learning a new language, you're trying to find a new social network around you, and that can be really difficult. So I had to zoom out there and kind of talk about all of these structures that are making it difficult for people to build these social connections, because I just want to articulate that it's not always your fault, right? It's not your fault that this is so hard for you. Now that I've gone on my spiel for 10 minutes, I'd love to spend a few minutes talking about, like, all right, given that it is kind of harder these days to find those social connections, how do we each kind of go about doing that for ourselves? Or what do we recommend to people when they're thinking about building those friendships that are so good for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. I think the pandemic honestly has a lot more to do with this. As you mentioned, the third spaces that are no longer there, but also just, we went through this period where it was like totally like bad for your health if you were interacting with someone who is not in your immediate circle. You could get COVID, you could die from COVID, you could go to the hospital for COVID. And how do we change this mindset? It has carried over even 5 years later. We are still kind of in our own little circles, afraid to sort of move out. I think because of public spaces, but also because of this like internalization of this mind shift, of this mentality. I think also for children, honestly, the world feels a lot more dangerous and unsafe. I remember growing up, I was 10 years old. I would go to the mall by myself. I had $10. I spent $5 on Chinese food, $5 on a milkshake, and I'd walk around with my other 10-year-old friends. And I don't see kids doing that. Now if a parent asked me, I'd be like, are you sure you feel confident that that's a safe place to send your kid? Like, you wouldn't leave them alone. And there's really now only playgrounds for, the really young age group, and like classes. And I think this leads to the answer to your question about like, how do we still nurture that? And I think the space for that is like affinity groups or interest groups. So like if you are a parent looking for that, like I think one thing the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends is, honestly, getting your child involved in something that they're interested in, like a dance class, a sports class, making an effort to get to know the other parents and sort of nurturing that skill. It's a shared hobby. And I think that will nurture some friendship as well. I think as an adult, when you are not in school, you are not going through things together, you're not like right next to someone, I think an affinity group also makes sense. It's just kind of what we try to do at Soft for Change, like with our events and community building. We have a variety of different types of events, and trying to not just focus it on, which I think is the easiest option, is like, going to the bar and drinking with the friends that you already know, but new and interesting ways to meet people and bring people close together.
I think this is one of the things that actually I almost see like the generation that's a little bit older than us doing a better job at. So like my dad, once he got, like one of his buddies convinced him to make a Facebook at this point, I don't know, like 10, 15 years ago. And he has consistently been reconnecting with people from his childhood, like people he knew for a brief moment in time over 50 years ago. But like that generation doesn't have this like cringe factor, right? To reach out to someone that they knew 50 years ago. And so he's been connecting with like just dozens of people that he knew briefly, and now they chat and they text and they have a high school like group chat where they're like sharing good morning texts and memes and all the things that brown parents do on WhatsApp. But I think it's fantastic because he's someone who, as many immigrant fathers are, was very involved with work and, like making sure that he's providing for, families here and back home in Bangladesh. But now that he's got more free time, it's like, cool, let me hang out with my buddies in these social spaces. And it's not weird to post on their Facebook and reach out and share my like, morning coffee. And I think that that's something that I think our generation, for fear of being cringy, for reaching out to people, we sometimes hold ourselves back. Or, we might like somebody and be like, oh, I kind of want to be their friend, but I don't know how to. Right. And I think that that's something that we could actually learn from our parents' generation. Like, I think that when they're doing it really well, they're actually really good at fostering friendships with people that they don't really know very well or might not have the opportunity to spend a lot of time with, but they don't shy away from reaching out. And I think that like the younger generations, especially like my younger cousins and things, are like, oh, I don't want to do that. That just seems too like, I'm being too vulnerable, and I'm seeming too needy. And I think that, I struggle with that too. And I think that we should take a note from the other generations.
Oh, I was like holding myself back while you were talking. So I was like, I have so much to say on this. So, okay, a few things. I agree. It's very difficult to make friends as an adult, and a solid 50% of my friends from college and adulthood, because I danced after I graduated from college professionally for a few years, are like people that I had this shared passion with. But then once I got into like law school and I was practicing, I'm not doing either of those things. And I have a best friend right now who is another lawyer. And I remember when I met her, we had known each other, but I really wanted to be her friend. I was like, this chick is cool. She dresses nice. She's smart. I want to be her friend. But I didn't know how to go about doing it. Right. And so I ended up doing what Kitty does, which is I got her a gift one day after we had a hard case thing that we went on. And I just got her a mug that was I don't know, it said something about hustle culture on there or whatever. And then after that, once that sort of connection started, she got me something back. And then we started going to get coffee every day at 2:15. But the thing that really solidified our friendship was the fact that we were being vulnerable with each other on our coffee dates. You can't just have small talk with somebody and expect to become a best friend. And of course, it developed over time, but we were extremely vulnerable. Well, one, we were working at a big law firm that was very challenging and had a lot of stress around that. But having those deep conversations and being able to be vulnerable was what made us strong. And I don't think you can be authentically yourself if you're not vulnerable. And if you're not authentically yourself, I don't think you can develop a deep relationship. And so this point on being cringy, I don't want to be cringy, I don't want to do that. Well, one, if the person that you're trying to be friends with thinks that you're cringy because of whatever behavior you did, do you really want to be friends with them anyway?
Right.
No, I don't want to be friends with somebody who thinks I'm cringy just because I'm trying to reach out and connect. Good, self-select yourself out. I don't want you here anyway. And on the other hand, if they don't think you're cringy or they appreciate the sort of reach out and connection, there you go. There's in my perspective, there is no loss. And it's so much easier said when you're I'm 35 now, I have a kid. I'm so strong in my conviction of who I am that I really don't care if anyone thinks I'm cringy. I know that's easier said now at this point in my life versus when I was 19. Yeah. Although Kitty can attest to the fact that I was a pretty strong 19-year-old, so I didn't think that then either. But I just think that mindset needs to change. If you want the deep connections, then go out there, be try your best. It's hard and it's a journey. Try your best to be strong in who you are and do what you want in order to make those connections. And if somebody doesn't reciprocate, that's their loss.
That's
my 2 cents.
Hearing each of you talk about these little tidbits that have worked for you, or, pulling from generations before us, taking the chance to be vulnerable and be yourself, and even just being in spaces where you might have things in common with other kids or other people around you. That makes my heart happy as someone who treats social anxiety disorder in my day-to-day life, because what I'm hearing, the common thread between all three of the things that you all have said is be visible, take that chance to be visible. I don't think that you need to be the most confident or perfect version of yourself in order to be those things, right? You can have a little bit of that fear and do it anyway. One of the things that I have done in, again, moving to a number of different places is I've tried to have lunch in open spaces, which sounds weird, but like instead of holding up in my office or in my cubicle, I'll try to just sit at like a communal table where people can come join me. Or, you know, if people are microwaving something, you know, we have a short conversation that turns into something, right? So just being visible, being open to the possibility that you could find someone who might connect with you on something, even if it's someone who you wouldn't totally expect to connect with. I think affinity groups and identity is one kind of automatic way that we think like, okay, this person might share values with us, but I have friends who I never would have expected. We have different political beliefs, identities, and other things, but we're still able to connect on things that matter. And those are some of the most valuable relationships in my life. So just taking that chance to be visible so that you can attract the kind of people who want to connect with you and want to talk to you about things, I think is just so important. That would be my kind of biggest takeaway from this episode for people, is just like, take a chance, do something that you've never done before, and be visible and see if you can attract other people who are willing to meet you halfway.
I think the vulnerability thing is also really big. Like, I think Rupal mentioned it, but I mean, the moment that I knew, Sonalee, that you were going to be in my life forever was, I think it was maybe our first year of grad school. So I don't handle bugs very well. Like I don't deal well with any type of crawling, flying bug type thing. And there are these, like, in my mind, they're giant stink bugs in Ann Arbor. And in the first apartment complex that I lived in, they were just all over the place. And Sonalee lived in the building next door. And it was like 1 a.m. There were like 2 of them flying in my apartment. And I was absolutely losing my mind. And so I call Sonalee and I'm like, they're here. And she like doesn't even say anything. I look out the window. I see her with a broom just like marching down to my apartment, climbing up the stairs, just like whacking the bugs and being like, are there any more? And I'm like, no, I think that's it. And she's like, all right, good night. And then like goes back to her apartment and I like watch to make sure she gets in. And I was like, why would anyone do that? Like, why did I feel comfortable calling her and telling her? And I'm like fully freaking out about these bugs and they're like harmless. They don't even bite. And she just did that for me. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like this is a real one right here. Like we're gonna be around forever.
I feel like this is, and I feel like comparing this to falling in love. Honestly, it's a leap of faith.
Honestly, yeah.
And even when you're first making friends, like Rupal, you were talking about this, like, why do we pick someone to be our friend? I think sometimes you have like a gut feeling, you're like curious about them. You follow this like, oh, I really want to know more about what makes this person tick. So there's this like curiosity, maybe this gut feeling. And you just kind of like go with that feeling. And it feels like the sense of falling in love. You're putting yourself out there, you're being vulnerable. Sometimes maybe you're cringy, maybe it makes you both laugh. You're like, maybe you even had a meet cute with your best friend. I consider ours a meet cute, but I think it's just like such a lovely way to look at it.
I love that. Did you, Sonalee, have like a milestone moment when you knew Afsara was going to be around forever?
I don't know that there was one. I think the thing that I associate most with our friendship and those deep moments of vulnerability that I've seen for us are frequently when we lived in the same apartment complex, we would be like up late at night as you are, you know, working on some essay or something for grad school or working on a paper or texting back and forth about classes, things like that. And one of the things that brings us together frequently is food. And one food in particular is fries. So very late at night when our sleep schedules were not ideal and when we were working very hard, we would often decompress by she would put me in her car and we would drive to a fast food joint together and go through the drive-through and get a bunch of fries. And it was a really simple act, but then we would end up talking in your car for hours and hours and hours. And there's one story in particular that I'm thinking of that I will let you share if you want to, that really solidifies like how deep such a silly moment can be, because we were truly in your car for like hours after just or something. But do you want to say a little bit more about this? story.
Yeah, so our fry runs are like pretty infamous because it's always after like 11 p.m. Which for me, as someone growing up with like really strict parents, I was never allowed to like be out late. So I was like, yes, let's go get some fries at 11 p.m. I know. But yeah, it was one of those times where we got fries, and instead of going into either of our apartments, which again were like buildings next to each other,
we were parked outside of my apartment.
I was parked outside of your apartment. You could have gone inside. You could have invited me inside. We didn't do any of that. We kept the car on because it was winter. And so we kept the heat on, we kept the car on, we kept the car running, and we're just eating our fries. And, you know, some sort of trauma dumping, I'm sure, is happening, either related to school or our families. I think I think one of the things, and Sonalee, you already mentioned this, but like just us discussing our families and our role within our families and, you know, kind of structurally just how that works out, it really bonds us. And so, you know, I'm sure that we were talking about all of the above well into like 3-4 a.m. territory. And this was on like a Sunday night, and we have like a 9 a.m. Monday morning thing that we were both on the committee for, so we had to be there. Eventually, our conversation ends. We're like, okay, we should really go to bed. And then that's when I realized my car, like the battery has died.
Oh, no.
Because of course we've been sitting there for like 4 hours at this point. And it's very late. So we're like, well, whatever, we'll just leave it here. We'll figure it out in the morning. And then we get up in the morning and we're like, neither of us has ever jumped a car before. I have like cables, but neither of us have done this before. We attempt it fails. We like look it up on YouTube. We're like trying not to die.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, that's a dangerous thing to try and do if you haven't done it before.
We've never, yes. And so yeah. It was like, do we try this? Do we miss like this thing? But no, we have to show up because it's like essentially work at this point. So then we end up going to work. We get yelled at by the director of the program, and someone else has to come save us. But it was just like a whole thing. We come back, like the car is still there. The cables have been stolen. Like it was just, it was a great time. It was
but
fun
you
time.
are also the reason I don't have a car anymore. I don't have a reason to have a car in Philadelphia, but you are the reason that I still have saved on my phone the instructions for how to connect jumper cables to a car. And anyway, I think that story is just so emblematic of like being there in multiple ways for each other across like the span of like 5 hours at a time. But when you talk about bonds and when you talk about vulnerability, like it started with a fry run and ended up with trying not to get blown up, you know, jump starting a car, and everything in between. So again, I feel like
how can you not be best friends after that?
It's like the tiny rituals that really the like they seem not important, but it's these rituals that really make the relationship so much stronger. Rupal and I used to go to, probably shouldn't say bar name, but
we went to Doobies.
It was just there were no doobies involved. But it was like, it was a dive bar. We would like go there and de-stress. And but it's like, it's such a simple thing. French fries or doobies. It was, it's like
the full range.
Yeah. And I think it could be turned,
just the name.
I think it could also be turned into like a little bit of a tip, like a practical tip. Like if you have a new friendship that's evolving, like maybe take the pressure off trying to plan something new and interesting all the time. And like, just like every other week, you guys go on a walk together, or you create your own little special ritual. And maybe it's like curly fries instead of regular French fries. I don't know, but I think they can really help build something special. And jumping a car sounds absolutely scary.
But also to your point, I think there's this idea too of like parallel play and taking the pressure off of like planning an activity or like going to dinner with someone for the first time. Like my best friend, when I was living in Oklahoma, we stayed in contact because every Saturday morning she would go on her grocery run and she would call me and she would just narrate her grocery run to me. And like we barely were talking, but that's just kind of how we stayed in each other's lives. And I think there's something to be said for building new friendships around that too. Like, hey, I need to run an errand. Do you want to come with me? That kind of thing is a really
We also did that a lot.
Tip. Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we did a lot of groceries together. Yes. Mire, Target. Yeah.
I think as a kid, we get to exist with our friends a lot, like just laying in your room, like listening to music, doing nothing. And then as you become an adult, it feels like everything has to have a purpose. Like you need to be doing something, like we need to go to dinner together and catch up or whatnot. But like, yeah, running an errand, just being on the phone with each other, just existing is like such a beautiful, low pressure way to nurture friendship.
I love that. I also sort of, maybe it's a good way to wrap things up, but I remember back to your point on sort of like, I'm interested about this person. I'm curious about this person, like that gut feeling. When we just were getting to know each other, we were on the dance team and, we were hanging out like at dance stuff, but me and my co-captain at the time, Vina, were, I was 1 year older than you and she's a few years older than you. So like, in the fall, we were out at a party with like our other friends that we already knew, and you guys were all freshmen, so we weren't hanging out with you. And I remember at a party with like all of our friends. It was a really fun party, and me and Dina just look at each other and we're like, "Should we go? Like, should we just like leave and go hang out with Kitty and Ummer?" Like, and we were like, "Yeah, I think like we should." And we just like left and like went and hung out with you guys at like, I don't know, like a Commons or something like that. And so also just like following that gut, like if you're curious about somebody, if you think that, there's something there, like explore it. And what do you have to lose? Like you have everything to gain. You could have a beautiful, I feel like friend is not even enough of a word for like what you are to me, which is like, I don't know, like soul sister, something like less mushy, but like, it's something. It's friend is not enough. And so, yeah, I feel like the benefits versus the risks of quote being cringy, like it's not even in my mind, it's not even a question.
I love that kind of final wrap up of everything that we've talked about so far. And I just want to say that all of the literature that you both have talked about will be in our show notes for people to peruse and take a look at if they want to. We're also going to be putting together resource packs around this to kind of synthesize a lot of the information that we've been discussing in this episode. So please check that out on our website or on our Instagram if you're interested to learn more. Before we finally sign off, I would love to give you both an opportunity. If you had one takeaway that you wanted our listeners to have from your thoughts on friendship, what might that be?
So hard to sum it up into one thought.
I might steal something that you kind of started saying, or you said a little bit, but I want to emphasize it is, really not focusing like one person to fulfill all the roles in your life. And I think that is where the importance of friendships really comes back into. I think that, I'm not saying that someone should have, a million friends and it really is about quality, but I think that going in with the understanding that no one person is going to be your everything and not having that expectation. And so using that as an opportunity to find your special someone's in different phases and different acts of life. I think that that's just like so joyful. And it's like so nice to have, your fry friend and your dance friend and, your movie friend. I think that it's really something that I strive for more in my life. I think one of my best friends and I, we called this role theory in college. I'm pretty sure it like exists as like a different theory, but like the fact that, people fulfill different roles in your lives. And I think that having a diverse set of friends, to share your life with is just like one of life's greatest joys. So I really want that for everybody, including myself.
I love that. I'm actually going to piggyback of something that you were talking about with the cringe thing. I think the process of making friends, I know we've talked about the benefits and we're all smiling on our, like we have huge smiles on our faces. And we're like, it's like a big love fest, mush fest, which is like really, really awesome. But I think like in the process of making friends, like, yeah, you're going to feel, it's going to be a little hard. It will feel inconvenient at times. You will have to switch things up to make time to go make these relationships. You will feel like you have to take that leap of faith. You'll like opening yourself up to someone, being vulnerable. It's not easy. It is hard. And I think put yourself out there. Like you deserve to take that chance, and you just never know what's going to come at the end of it. And I think it's okay. Like not every single friendship has to be this, like, I know we have this best friend relationship we're talking about right now, but not every single friendship has to be that way. And a friend could just be someone who offers you some support, and it could look different based on what your goals are. So definitely don't be shy, put yourself out there, take that leap of faith.
Love that. Thank you both so much for being here, mostly for hanging out with Rupal and I, because we love hanging out with each other. We also love hanging out with the rest of our friends. So thank you again for lending your friendship and your expertise to the pod. We hope you will not be strangers and you will be back for future episodes. And yeah, we're looking forward to hearing how our listeners are going about making friends. Certainly keep sending us voice notes, messages, comments on Instagram. We see this as our community and our version of giving you friendship. And so we want to hear how you're doing that too. But thanks so much for being here. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was just going to say, and if you're local, if you're in the Philadelphia area, like even if you're a little bit outside of Philadelphia and you're looking to build community, definitely check out our organization, South Asian Americans for Change, SA for Change on Instagram. We have live events all the time with lots of people that are looking for community to build friendships. A lot of people come to our events alone, and it is actually something that we look out for. If we see somebody coming to an event alone, it's very important for us to make eye contact with anyone who comes alone and like go right up and talk to them. So if you're wanting to come, but you're worried about coming alone, just come. You're going to have a great time. You're going to have somebody to talk to. And it's a great place to start to build community with some people who are like-minded, if that's what you're looking for.
The Desi Doubts podcast is a production of South Asian Americans for Change, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health care or therapy. Desi Doubts is hosted by Dr. Sonalee Joshi and Rupal Joshi. Our guests for this episode were Dr. Keerthi Channarasappa and Dr. Afsara Zaheed. Desi Doubts is produced by Nima Nardoni, Keerthi Channarasappa, Megha Pathak, and Nithya Cherakuru. It's edited and mixed by Ravi Ray, and our theme music is by Rianjali. For questions and comments, email us at desidoubtspod@saaforchange.org and follow us at desidoubtspod on Instagram. If you enjoyed the episode and are feeling extra kind, please also give us a review on Apple Podcast, YouTube, or Spotify.